Gather up your pocket hole jigs and find yourself a good garbage can. This week I'm showing you a better way with a mortise and tenon joint. Okay folks, first things first. Empty those garbage cans back out. These things are extremely useful. I use pocket holes all the time in my shop. Always have, I probably always will. But if all your joinery consists of pocket holes, following on last week's theme, it's time to up your game a bit. Now I've got two different methods of joinery here. One is pocket hole and one is mortise and tenon. To the naked eye, when they're assembled, you're probably not going to be able to tell much of a difference. On the back side of the pocket hole joinery, we do have these pocket holes, but you could fill those in with plugs. Quite frankly, this is super easy to do. It's quick, it's inexpensive, and it's pretty strong, as I mentioned before. But when you really want to move past pocket holes and you have a piece of joinery like this, where you've got a vertical stick meeting a horizontal stick, let's talk mortise and tenons. If I just show you the pieces of the mortise and tenon joint here, there is the mortise. This does not go through. You could have a through mortise where it sticks out the other side. This is not, but that's the mortise. Here we have the tenon, and the shoulder on the tenon, when it fits on the face of the mating piece, that is what really gives this some strength from twisting, turning. This is going to stay together for a very, very long time just with glue. Now the fastest way for me in my small shop to make mortise and tenon is with some dedicated machinery. This piece right here actually is a dedicated mortising machine, and this is actually a dedicated tenoning jig for the table saw, but I'm also going to step you through hand making these things with just hand tools. So let's get started. So I always start with the mortise because we can always trim the tenon narrower to get it to fit properly. And so I'm going to just mark that off. I know I've got a 3/4 inch piece of wood here. I want 1/8 inch shoulders there, leaving a 1/2 inch in between. So I am going to mark that. Here, let's go 1/2 inch shoulders the other direction. This is where our mortise is going to be. Now the magic behind this dedicated mortising machine is this square 4-sided chisel, and in the middle of it, it has a drill bit that's going to be spinning. The chisel makes the square corners nice and neat, and the drill bit hollows out the center of that. Now you can also buy these bits for your drill press, so if you want to go that route instead of having a dedicated machine, that's available to you as well. I've adjusted the fence properly. I'm going to cut once on each end and then fill out in the middle here. The mortise can actually be made completely by hand with a chisel. We're going to put it in, hit it, knock out this first little piece with the flat side faced against the back. Then we're going to start moving forward bit by bit. This chisel will be exactly as wide as the mortise should be, and we're going to make about 1/8 of an inch. At the end, we're going to flip it around, knock that out, and go back and start all over again, do another layer. But here's the rub. This is not a mortising chisel. Apparently, I haven't used my mortising chisel since I moved into this new shop, and I can't figure out where they are. This chisel has beveled edges here. A mortising chisel has square shoulders here to really clean out the sides of the mortise here. But just so you don't feel cheated, I'm going to put a link to a how-to video on making a mortise with a chisel up here, and for those of you who want to follow that, go ahead and take a look at that. However, I will show you a third way, which is a hybrid method using a drill and a standard chisel. The process involves using a Forstner bit to dig out most of the meat of the mortise. I start at one end, drill the hole at the other end, then come back and fill in between. And I typically do this at the drill press, but I'm going to use a hand drill just to show you that it can be done. With most of the wood gone in the mortise, now I can come back with a chisel and just pare down the sides and the ends. And to pair the sides and the ends square, you don't necessarily need a mortise chisel. That can easily be done with a standard bench chisel. And there you go, Bob's your uncle. With the mortise cut, we can make the marks on our tenon piece for size. Take this one to the table saw and cut it out there. I've got the tenoning jig set up on my table saw, and it's as easy as getting the blade set to the right height for the depth of the tenon, and then getting the horizontal adjustment set for the size of the shoulder. And then we can make the cut. We should be able to flip this over, make the cut on the other side, then make the horizontal adjustment for the other two tenons. And then finally, with our cross-cut fence in here, we're going to come back and make a cut on each one of those shoulders, get a nice clean cut, and cut those pieces off. Truth be told, I'm not that big of a fan of the tenoning jig unless I have a ton of tenons to make of the same size. Instead, I like the old Norm Abrams method. I'm going to make my first cut, create the shoulders, and I'm going to keep running it through, nibbling off little bits until I get all of the pieces. When that first nibbling is done, you're going to see it's very rough here. Then I'm going to go back and run it in and out against the blade to really smooth it out. If you're not a big fan of the Norm Abrams method, you can still use your table saw to cut these without the tenoning jig. Stack a whole big fat dado stack in there, and probably 1 or 2 passes on that dado stack is going to give you the length you need for the tenon. Another way that I love to make the tenons is with a handsaw, and I used to use this really expensive dovetail saw, which is a classic traditional Western saw where you push to cut. But recently I've got hooked on these Japanese saws which pull, and they're super cheap, they're super easy to use, it's really rewarding. So I've got this marked off as to where my cuts are. And I'm just going to get in here and start sawing. And there you go, folks, a little primer on the mortise and tenon joint. There's so much more to learn, in particular, joinery methods for getting this to stick together. As I said, all you really need is glue in here, but there's some old-fashioned things you could learn, like a through tenon with either wedges in the back of it where it sticks out, or the tenon actually completely sticking out like we do in arts and crafts, and then driving a wedge or a pin this way. Also using a pin to go right through the mortise, or a dowel to go right through the mortise and pin it in there. So much to learn. Google a bit, learn about that. I could talk about this for days and days, but we're running out of time, folks. One more thing, one more method I want to talk about real briefly. There are ways to do this with a router, but I'm going to save that for another issue when we talk about the router specifically. For now, folks, Chris Schmidt signing out from Key West. Thanks so much for watching. We'll have more of this next week. Yeah, that happened.